I am Nathan Boyles, for those of you that don't know me, representing District 3, the #1 district in Okalosa County, of course. It's kind of, that's right, yeah. So it's also kind of the gerrymandered district in Okalosa County, so it's basically they built the other 4. There are 3 South County districts exclusively, there is 1 North County district exclusively, and then mine straddles both. So it actually goes all the way from the Alabama line up north of Blackman, all the way down basically to Hurlburt Field and Highway 98 right at the Sound down in South Okalosa County. So really, geographically, it's like literally half of Okalosa County. It includes a big chunk of Eglin, obviously, and it's basically the northwest side of Okalosa County and gets narrower as it goes down through the south. What that means is that I have portions of incorporated Crestview, Fort Walton Beach, Niceville, and Valparaiso within my district. So now I mentioned there are 5 districts, 3 are exclusively South End, meaning only folks that live in the South End can run for those. There's 1 that's North End, and then mine currently, unless it changes with the census, is what you would call a swing district, right? It could go either way. And so I am speaking to a broad audience out there once this goes to Facebook, but right now I suspect most of folks that are here live north of Eglin, is that right? Anybody that came all the way down from the South End? No, because their roads are good, so they're like, nah, we'll just stay up here. And by the way, traffic is terrible coming up this way. So I'm not going to run again. This is my 3rd term. This will be my final term running for the seat, meaning it is going to be up for grabs in 2024, I think. So just file that away in the back of your head. Maybe you think I've done a decent job. Maybe you think I've done a lousy job. Whatever you think, it's important to have a voice and to make sure we represent on some of these things that we've been working on. Transportation issues certainly being one of those up here in the North End. And yeah, it is a lovely job. I will tell anyone who wants to run that. It's also kind of agonizing at times, but by all means, sign up and fill out your financial disclosure, tell everybody how much you own and how much you make, and come jump in the fun, seriously. All right, so really the impetus for getting together tonight was a study that has been done by DOT. So obviously I get a lot of feedback about Highway 4 and Highway 189. It really has gotten, the feedback and the traffic volume has gotten a lot more substantial in the last, I'd say 3 to 4 years. Really, 2016, 2017, I think as the economy started to come back and as the tourism market really began to grow, and a lot of people say, and I think they're probably right, Google changed its algorithm, and all of a sudden this was identified as the fastest route south to the beaches, and it was like all of a sudden overnight, here comes all this traffic. And so we have a lot more traffic out on the highway than we used to. And we're growing, we know that, right? There's houses being built, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's just more locals, and you got the tourism traffic, and it is made for what is, I think, a reasonably dangerous corridor. And I don't know what the times, do you know the time scale by chance on this data, Jason?
Last 5 years.
Okay, so 5 years of crash data. You can see basically a whole pile of crashes, and then tragically, I think I see 4 at least red dots indicating fatalities on that roadway within the last 5 years. And so it's certainly something that I kept getting this feedback from constituents. So we went to DOT. I don't want to get too far in the weeds. There's a TPO, which is a transportation planning organization that has some actual legal authority over transportation projects. That is made up of local elected officials like me. So there's some county commissioners from Okalosa, county commissioners from Walton, and then city council members from Walton and Okalosa County cities. We make up the TPO, and we get to have some say in how some of your state and federal transportation dollars are spent. Well, we live in what they consider a rural area, which is outside the boundary of the TPO. So what that means is that technically we have no legal voice in what happens on any of the state roads that happen to be in this area. And the good news is DOT's been very good to work with over the last 8 years in particular, and so they are usually very open to feedback, and they don't always do what we want them to do, but they've certainly always been open to kind of taking a look at an issue when it's been presented. So we presented this issue to them, said, hey, can you take a look at the corridor? Can you update your traffic counts? Because they were all old data from, say, more than 5 years ago. And they said yes. takes them some time, right? So everything's done on a budget cycle, and so I think it was like a year before they got the money in the budget, and then it took another 6 months or 9 months for them to go through the study process. And so what we're seeing now is actually the culmination of an effort that started, I think, like 2 years ago by us reaching out to DOT and saying, hey, we really need you to take a look at this. So I'm going to kind of go ahead and get to the spoiler. We're not going to get the road 4-laned anytime soon. The study just does not, the traffic counts do not warrant 4-laning that entire highway. I'm not in charge of that. I didn't make up the data. I don't make up DOT's rules, but that is what the study came back and showed pretty clearly. And honestly, it was by a pretty wide margin that it doesn't come close yet to meeting the type of traffic. And their projections out the next 20 years don't show them seeing the traffic getting to that point within that time frame to warrant them starting to try and prioritize funding on what would very honestly be a, I don't know, what do you think, Jason, $100 million project?
It was estimated at $68 million current.
68 million in current dollars, so 100 million by the time it gets built. Which is obviously a lot of tax money. So that's the bad news. There is some good news kind of buried in all of that. One, they'll reconsider in the future. So we'll do the same thing in 3 or 4 or 5 years. If traffic volumes continue to increase, we'll go back to them and say, hey, we think these circumstances have changed. We really need you to take a look at this thing and go back through a study process, and they'll do that for us. So that's number one. Number two, they did identify that there are some problems on the corridor, very obviously. And so they have basically now gone and said, all right, so we've identified that we've got some problems. It's not to a point where we would say we can start to allocate some dollars for 4-laning, but we see we need to allocate some dollars for safety. And so they identified 2 areas in particular that were, I guess, even more concerning than the rest of the corridor. And that was basically in downtown Baker, in the vicinity of the school intersection, and then at the Gallagher cutoff intersection. And so what the preliminary study showed was a recommendation that Gallagher intersection may need a light located at that light, or that intersection. If you've been through there, then I think most of the feedback I've been getting is that folks agree. That's why we're here tonight, to kind of see what the community has to say in a broader sense. So what DOT is going to do now, and you may have seen some survey markers actually out there if you had noted on the side of the road, they're now going to gather some more data and actually start to move into an in-depth review and planning phase to identify what an intersection should look like, what modifications to the pavement would need to be made, and then ultimately develop a set of design plans for probable implementation within the next few years. I probably should have done this earlier. We'll do now. We'll do a few introductions so y'all know who is here. Jason Autrey, our Director of Public Works. When anything about your road is not right, it's always his fault.
And if it is right, it's his
exactly, right? And when we get something fixed, it's always,
that's right.
I did that. We've got John Hofstad, who's our County Administrator, in the back of the room. John came up through the Public Works ranks, and so he knows these roads as well as anybody, and he is actually a local. He is a native of or at least a resident of the best district in Okalosa County, District 3. We have Edward Sisson sitting in this evening, our HR director for the county. I'm not sure why he's here. It may be just to make sure that I don't go badly off script and risk legal liability for the county. And we have April Sarver, who is here, who is our Public Information Officer for the county, making sure that we get all of this properly documented. And Sam Cutzinger, who is our Executive Assistant up in the North End for both myself and Commissioner Paul Mixon, your Commissioner from the second best district, District 1 in Okalosa County, and also the procurer of the cookies tonight. So make sure that you drinks. So, Jason, tell me, do you have anything? Do you want to add any flavor or color? Let's kind of get through the DOT study stuff, and then we'll kind of maybe from there leap into some of these other issues.
And if you can hear Nathan, I guarantee you can hear me. He's the good Lord bless me with a solid voice, and the cold is gone, so I'm good. Commissioner said it very accurately. The DOT did a feasibility study that looks at very big picture what could be done out there. It says it's just not time for a 4-lane road yet, and the reason behind it is, and And I can tell you, I know it's bad on Saturdays, but if you take the Saturdays and you look at that from a year perspective, let's say you've got a dozen, maybe 20 of those Saturdays, 20 out of 365 days, doesn't mean that the DOT looks at year-long numbers. But they did say you've got some spots operationally that we can make some improvements on that we feel will help the overall corridor. And as the commissioner said, they're at the Gallagher cutoff area and they're at the Baker Shore. And so they're doing studies now, in-depth studies now of how you can make improvements. The simple one is a signal at the Gallagher cutoff and 189 out there at the Ritz Food Store. That will have tremendous safety improvements out there. My wife is from what you claim is the best district in Okalosa County. And I have made that left turn before, and it is harrowing at certain times of the day or on the weekends. So they see that as an improvement. The school area, it's not just a signal out there. There's lane improvements, there's crosswalk improvements. I can't remember the top of my head. But what the feasibility study, where this comes from, it kind of gives big picture, think about 15,000 foot kind of views. And now they're doing an analysis that's going to actually be a detailed design for which they'll fund. I had a conversation with the district secretary about 2.5 weeks ago. He's well aware of it, and his comment to me and to the county was, listen, we're moving forward with the study, and when it comes out, we will fund this, we will do this work. We just got to stay on it to do it, which the commissioner made sure that we do. So there are some improvements that they plan to come forward. I will tell you that as citizens on the roadway, we always want more than what they give. Probably the best way I would describe that, but I do think they're making a very positive step forward. The state's making a positive step forward, and they're aware of it. Other things that are occurring is they are doing a resurfacing project on the entirety of 189. So I think they're probably seeing going through some of that now. That is a safety improvement that will help. You get rid of the ruts in the roads, you make the lines more visible, those things kind of things do help. But we won't see capacity expansion in the foreseeable future. So, I don't know what more you'll mention.
No, I think that's good. So let's do this. We'll kind of, that was one of the my main reasons for being here tonight. We want to walk through that. I want to hear what y'all have to say about that corridor. Let's kind of have our discussion about specifically the Highway 4 189 corridor, and then we'll close that, and then we'll go on to the other items we may want to talk about tonight or whatever y'all want to talk about tonight. So questions, comments, concerns? Yes, ma'am.
When was the last study done on our road? Has it been done within the last 6 months to a year?
Yes, this has been done in the last 6 months. Yes, this was just completed.
Very fascinating because since Hurricane Michael, I personally have noticed it is very difficult on Saturdays, especially to get out on Highway 4. We have an influx of tourism, which I could be very wrong. I'm not perfect. I strongly feel like because of Hurricane Michael, we do have more traffic coming through our area because they're not going to the east anymore like they once did. They're coming to Fort Walton, Destin, Navarre Beach, and they're coming down this way. Traffic is really horrible. I've also noticed throughout the years as our school is getting bigger, you are correct. The intersection right there at Gallagher Cutoff is a very dangerous intersection. There's 3 times a day where it is very scary to navigate that one area. Also, when you get down to the end of South Highway 4 at the intersection of Highway 90, you're coming down a hill, and our visitors to the area aren't slowing down like they should. And that's causing a lot of wrecks at the end of South Highway 4 going whatever way to Highway 90. Those are some things that really need to be addressed.
Yes, ma'am. No, noted on all fronts. The only thing I'll say in response is I certainly agree with you on the Highway 90 intersection, no doubt. I think that one's a geography issue, which is hard to fix with that downslope going into that intersection. With regard to the tourist traffic, I 100% agree. and DOT will 100% not build a road based upon 1 day a week for 6 months out of the year. They're just not going to do it for us. And so I hate to say it's one of those things we're going to have to bear with that Saturday traffic, but what they do is they take that data and then they annualize it out to see what the actual impact is. So
Baker isn't the little farm country anymore.
No.
I live here on the property at the Baker Rec Center, and I field phone calls at least 7 to 8 a week wanting to know what our area is all about. So this just isn't our little sleepy farm country anyhow. We have a lot of military who like the quiet life, who want to get away when they're not working, serving our country, and they want to have a quieter location. That's why I've discovered that a lot of the military are moving into this area. So we do have a lot more residency coming into the area, not just the local people that were born here and are staying here family generation after generation.
yes, ma'am, for sure. Let me get this gentleman and then I'll come here. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. Number one, actually I got three. Piggyback off of Highway 90 and 189, which is very dangerous. I think we all know that. Is there something that can be done, advanced warning signs or advanced flashing lights? Because I've seen that in other locations, let you know that there's a signal coming up ahead and it's dangerous, or something on that line, because you actually drive and not paying attention to whatever, and don't go highway without forgetting.
Yeah, no, well, so let's make
And the quick answer is yes, and I will absolutely share that with them, and I think that's all part of what they look on that bill.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, so I think to your point, and I'll give the floor back to you. I think what you're noting, and rightly so, is that in particular, so it's got the bumps, right? It's got the slow down ridges.
Correct.
Those are great when it's a typical Tuesday afternoon and traffic is stopped at the bottom of the hill. To your point, on Saturday midday when traffic stopped, all the way back to Wadsworth, or right in that area, and you crest right at the top of that hill, and there it is. That you didn't get any warning when you got to that point. So absolutely noted. Yep.
So my second
Well, I'll get you.
question is the traffic light in Baker. On a Saturday, the traffic is backed up beyond the Preston George Act, a couple miles up the road. Can that timing or the sequence of that be adjusted to accommodate the traffic?
And you're talking about the southbound, the north and southbound traffic trying to get through. Yeah.
I've seen it
Yeah.
backed up beyond the wrecks that are down to Dollar General going northbound in the morning,
Okay.
southbound in the afternoon, don't even bother getting on the road.
Yep. Okay. No, also noted, and that is within our control to at least
There's
take a
two
look at
pieces
it.
of that. When they look at the immediate is we can look at those impacts. The only thing I would remind you of, and I'm not saying this is the case, but think of it as a string or a rubber band, it's a circle. You pull one side, you affect the other. So you might open up one, but we will absolutely take a look at that. When they do the analysis of the Baker School and the other intersection, they'll put all of that in a coordinated system to work together. So that alone will change the timing of that
That's
signal,
true, yeah.
much less what we can do immediately.
And I'm gonna just touch on number three. I won't go into much detail. So a few weeks ago, probably spring break, someplace up north, whatever it was, the traffic was so bad on 189, coming to the stoplight in Baker, they were going down C4A, cutting down Jack Stokes on a dirt road to avoid the traffic. And I'm talking Mercedes, I'm talking high-end cars, going on that dirt road. And that's just wear and tear on the road. And unfortunately, we live at the corner of Jack Stokes and Highway C4A. So the traffic on that day was, it was a steady stream. And I've never seen that happen before.
You think Waze.
Yeah.
Waze.
Yeah.
So these apps are doing tremendously odd things to our traffic.
No, I understand, but
No, I think, and to your point, the solution is if we can keep it from backing up, then it's less likely that they take the cutoff. And maybe we just need to not grade it the week before.
local traffic that is avoiding
Yep.
189.
Yep, understood.
I've never seen so many cars go down that road.
Okay, no, good, very good to know. Yes, ma'am, and then I'll get you next.
Maybe I didn't understand, but it seemed that you were saying only about 20 weeks out of the 20 days out of the 365. Well, it starts on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Saturday's probably the worst.
Yeah.
But we have that heavy traffic 3 days, because if you know about the condos, they switch out on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have this traffic, not just one day a week, at least 3, and then even Monday morning. If you're watching coming from the beach, Monday morning, sometimes they're coming. And we haven't even got into the busy, but it's been terrible near spring break.
Yes, ma'am.
I
And
live off of Benson Ray Road, and that is a terrible intersection. They've got signs there, they're supposed to slow down to 50.
yeah,
You're taking your life in your hand, and there have been accidents there.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
another intersection that's very busy.
yes, ma'am.
A lot of people live down, there's an airport down on it,
Yes, ma'am.
Benson Ray, and there's a road across going, the Farm Hill Road or whatever. So that is a real dangerous intersection that has nothing except a little tiny sign about like that, 50 miles an hour, and they fly through there about 70.
Yeah.
Those Alabama people have high rate of speed on.
Yes, sir. Understood.
There to watch, to catch them. I mean, they're just, they just go like so those are some things
Okay.
that I think are not being represented. We're talking about more than one day a week during the busy time.
Yes, I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify the problem. And trust me, I live up here, I get it. I completely understand. And really my statement is a simplification of the fact that DOT is going to take, they were doing actual count. So they've got actual data, and then they're annualizing that across the year. And, we're fighting with lots of other places that have these northbound highways that are seeing increased traffic, just like we're seeing. And so it's a matter of competing for those scarce dollars. But your point's well taken. And it's not just one day a week. I get it. Yes, ma'am.
And it's almost five to 7 days a week during the summer.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Unbearable.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I teach at the school, and last year, we changed our traffic flow for parent pickup and our bus flow out because of the problem on the floor. Adding those turn lanes into the school and on both sides, going southbound and north, helped. But the only way that you can really get out in the afternoon from the school, not right on the tail end of a bus that somebody's letting out, you got to go up to the light to get out. It's extremely dangerous for the kids who drive as well as those buses. But we've done all we can do with the local
Uh-oh. It's all right. They weren't that exciting anyways, honestly.
But we've done what we could do to try to get the traffic off of 4 back into the neighborhoods, but we've maxed it out. Something I'm interested to hear if they're planning to extend the turn lanes to put them to the other 2 streets that lead back to the school instead of just 14th. The next 2 streets also. That would help, not going southbound in the afternoon necessarily, but certainly getting to the school in the morning. I've got seniors that live north of town who can't get to school on time because they get caught up in that morning traffic and they're late to school. And
Is that what they're telling you?
They can't get to school
Yeah.
on time because they get caught up in that traffic.
I get it.
Now, the road construction's made it a little more,
Yeah.
but I agree that the Delaware cutoff, that's a dangerous intersection, especially if you're trying to turn left to go north. But anything that can be done to improve the safety and traffic flow up by the school should be given priority, just because we're right at 1,500 kids going to the school, and it's likely to grow. We've got supposedly, rumor is, 2 more housing developments being built. They're going to bring another 200 to 300 kids into the school over the next year and a half.
No, yes, I think the answer to the question is DOT. That's absolutely, so they narrowed into those areas where they've got to.
But it's going to take us locally to make sure they understand that. Because if they're just running their cords across the road and doing the traffic count, they have no earthly idea when the peak hours are and what the danger is.
Actually, those 2 give them hour breakdowns.
Do they?
The difference of what they're doing now is they took high-level numbers. They will actually go and specifically pay attention to those peak hours. So they do track all that. But those counters, we have some in the county. I can tell you what time the cars go through and what speed they go through based on those 2 fleets set out. So it's tremendous information that all.
And so now I'll add this. So the point's well taken, and I think we'll make sure that they are paying special attention to that. And the truth is that, the traffic patterns relative to schools have changed monumentally. One, they've been changing over the last decade. We're all a little more sensitive, and a lot of less kids ride the bus, frankly, right now. And so there are a lot more parents coming and going to school every day, and then you throw the pandemic into the mix, and so it's been, there's some, the infrastructure has to catch up to, people change their habits very quickly, but it takes a little bit more time for the infrastructure to catch up, and so we've seen a major transition in the traffic pattern around that school.
Not to bash the Department of Transportation, but they haven't solved 85 yet. They were screwing around with that.
Well, yeah, I
lived here for 22
sure.
years and they've been screwing around with that.
Yeah, so here's the thing, but let's.
It only took 15 years to four-lane it back in the day.
Yeah, but right, no, I get it, but again, so this road in today's dollars, $60 million. Where do you want to get the $60 million is the first question, and so it's. Traffic problems are they're these self-creating like monsters, right? So we're taking a major bite at the 85 issue, and I'm super proud of all of the effort that's going into that. And the interchange and the bypass are $200 million. DOT is going to come behind that in the next 10 years. They're going to 6-lane 85. We've got a bunch going on, and you know what's going to happen? We're going to build a bunch of new houses, and we're going to build a Target or whatever they decide they're going to build next, and then there's going to be more traffic problems right around those new roads. And so there's this thing like you don't even really ever, I think we have to be realistic about what our expectation is, and if our expectation is that we want to be able to go at any time or day or night wherever we want to go from point A to point B with no friction in between, then I think we're just not thinking about a realistic system, certainly not one we can afford to pay for. And so it's a matter of figuring out what is realistic and what are we willing to bear in that kind of cost-benefit trade-off. And that's really what we have to talk about when we talk about these problems. I'm a very much all right, I found a problem, I want it fixed tomorrow. Like, I have no patience, very little tolerance. I'm getting a little bit better as I age, but I've learned now, having worked this process, it took me the first 4 years. My first term was just to figure out how in the heck it works. I'm trying very hard to be good. If I slip one out tonight, I apologize, but I'm trying very hard to be good. And so then, once you kind of see this process, it is amazing how complicated it is. And you do want to take the time to do the studies, to do it right, because the projects are so bloody expensive that you don't want to go spend $100 million on a poorly thought out piece of infrastructure and then go, oh, gee, we should have put that money over here, or we should have done that differently. So, but I get it. I completely understand the frustration. Yes, ma'am.
We were talking earlier about Highway 4 and Highway 90. What's going to happen when they put the truck stop where the church is?
So they're putting the CEFCO next to the church, which is the current plan, and it's going to get worse. I got no.
Study, does that include that?
That's a little different. So when that development comes in, they'll have to do their own study to address operational issues around there. The DOT will take that as background information.
I thought the CEFCO was going in across the bridge.
Yeah, on that corner,
Yeah.
what I was told.
The truck
On
stop's going where the church is.
What? Okay. I may have bad information.
That's what I.
Yep.
Regardless, the same is true. When a development is proposed, whether it's a housing subdivision or a gas station or a fast food restaurant, they're required to provide what's called an operational analysis, which is like this detailed study the DOT is doing to figure out ways to make it safe for access into and out of their development. And they pay for it. When the DOT does their study, they'll factor that into their.
But it's back to the same issues. It's a great place to live, and more people want to live here. And then when people live here, they need places to gas up, and it's this. It's almost some view that as progress. Other people view it as.
Traffic that's bad right there at the light. So when the truck stop comes in.
Yes, ma'am. I know you're using the term truck stop. I don't know that they're going to build a truck stop not on I-10. I think what you're talking about is probably a large convenience store. So I get it, but I just want to make sure we're not talking about. So far as I'm aware. Well, you may have better information than I do. Yeah. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if they do the red light at Gallagher, will they also extend turn lanes
or will it still be there?
If you do a signal there, I can't fathom the way they construct it without doing lane modifications.
Yes.
I can fully imagine you'll have turn lanes, left, right turn lanes, which directions, I'm not sure, but I don't know. Dropping the signal on there would not work very well.
And do you know if something's planned for that corner where there's a Sepco truck stop? Are they basing it strictly on traffic count or projection of what expected
Which corner?
on Gallagher Cup?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't have any information about anything that's coming at Gallagher. Their DOT is basing their studies off of current traffic flow, and then they have models that project out based upon current traffic flow, and they projecting forward. Correct. They don't. DOT doesn't. I don't think they got any information we don't have with regard. And I don't think that's something they typically look at. That's yeah.
And it's almost unfair because you could say you've heard some things, but you just, until it's there, you don't know that it's true. That's the problem.
All right.
Just saying.
Yes, sir.
It's a little different.
Concerns me, you know, I mean, all this expansion stuff is good, but the local water system, local utilities were caught on the quagmire the last time that they did anything to highway 40.
Yep.
The expense of what the utilities had to do was passed on to the local customers. And that really impacted the water system in Milligan as well as at Baker. But in Milligan, we spent almost $350,000 moving a water line that we already had a water line that was serving the public, but we had to put in another water line across the road to go down. And there's never any funding attached to any of this stuff that would help offset the cost. But we have to pass that cost on to our local customers. And the last one almost doubled water bill because of it. Because we had no more credit because we just done an upgrade.
Yep.
And that upgrade was to not so much support more customers, but better support the customers we had with fire protection throughout the system. And it was quite an event for that to go on. And the people we met with the state said that had we approached the state early on, that funding could possibly have been acquired for that the public or the local people would not have to have paid back. It's been more like a grant to make the move. And we were told, well, after the fact, you can't do it, but before the fact. So in the pre-planning for all this stuff, it would be nice if that was brought up early on. I mean, if we had to send representatives to a meeting or something like that, we'd be glad to do it. Because it, you know, when you start affecting people's household budgets, and a lot of people run fixed budgets around here, then we have to answer why we did that. And my ears look a little shorter because I already burned a few times. But,
Yes, sir.
it was nothing that we could avoid, you know, to do it. And also the traffic, we talked about traffic, backing up the intersection down here. I've approached the state numerous times to have a speed sign or speed limit sign lowered prior to getting to the intersection down. And they finally came in and put one up a little further up the road where it was at.
Okay.
But it's still not adequate to get people's attention because I live right just at the top of the hill, a little above it up there, and people are still passing one another going south.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we could put a flashing light saying you'll die in a minute or something.
They'd be too busy texting. They wouldn't see it.
Yeah, well, that's another problem. Matter of fact, I was wrecked this is last weekend. A lady was texting and run into a car. But I mean, to get something to get their attention so they can get it at least out of cruise control. Because the majority of the wrecks that have happened there have happened because they're still at 50 pounds.
These are rear-end collisions. The majority of those accidents are depicted with rear-end collisions, which is simply a factor of driver awareness. Everybody that has a pen and a pad of paper, I'm going to tell you my epitaph right now. I want you to write it down. You cannot out-design stupid. that is an undeniable fact, and what you described is the bane of my professional career. I wish people would just obey the rules.
Well, that was so next time. You know, there's a lot of things you can't fix, but I mean, just to slow people down would help tremendously. And
if the driver will do it, that's the problem. And when you have people that are coming down here They think they know better. I'm a better driver than you. I can get past you. If you were just out of my way, I'd get to my condo faster. I'd get to my whatever faster. And unfortunately, what you're relying upon is a responsible driver. And I can't come up with a sign that'll make you do that.
Well, just to have it further up the road would help, I believe.
Yeah,
If it were, you know, yeah.
And that is part of what that detailed analysis will look at. That's operational issues. They will absolutely look at those items.
And we're going to make sure I think we're making a note to make sure that they take into account the fact that when you have these peak times, you have that traffic packed further up the hill, and so it presents a unique problem. And I think that's how we'll present that to them. Is that we're not asking to four-lane the road. We're simply asking to make note that at certain times of the day, because traffic's backing up, the sight lines are different to the effective stop point, and that they need to take a look at that.
Yeah,
So
you know where the water system is there, at the crest of that hill, you should start seeing something happen there.
Yeah.
Not wait till you get right down there close to it and start
Yeah.
backing off. Because like I said, majority of the people that I've helped there that have had crashes, added in cruise control just before they saw the crash.
Yep.
I mean, they just did not have the time to react to it.
Yep.
And, you know, anything like that, and then, of course, the biggest thing, I guess, is I would have to say is, you know, when they do start to think about widening this road, you know, the encroachment on the people that have been there forever, you know, you're gonna be taking it where it's like me and you to the house. I mean, that's gonna weigh heavy on a lot of people's lives, you know?
Yep.
Because by the time we get 10 years down the road, that little bit of property they're gonna buy there in front of your house to give right of way, there again, that's gonna move the water lines and everything too, because we're right on the edge now. But those people will not be able to acquire property because of costs going up for what little bit they'll get, let alone try to move the house that's been there for 67 years, you know?
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I don't have a good answer for that one, other than that's one of those, that somebody's ox is always going to get gored in that process, and there's no doubt about it. The good news is, if that's your perspective for now, I don't see any widening coming in the next 10 years for sure. So I had a couple over here, and then I'll circle around.
I want to ask, just before you get Gator Cafe, there's a yellow painted strip where one vehicle can park to turn left.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you park over on the right, you're in the traffic lane. Now, you talking about stupid, whoever laid that out was stupid.
So that's an interesting question. We'll have to go back and take a look at the.
It's not marked off as a turn lane like the school, but
They made some adjustments. That goes back a few years, I think, and they made some adjustments when they were extending that turn lane at the school. But your point is well taken, and I'll say very honestly, I'm familiar with that spot because I find myself sitting in that spot to make a left-hand turn from time to time.
you stop over the right-hand side, you're going to get rear end.
Yeah, and that in the middle is just a little shy of a full vehicle width. I am intimately familiar. Yeah. Yep. Noted. Yes, sir.
Start off by saying that something Google Maps algorithm is now routing all this tourist traffic down this way. I'm not a real techie guy, so this may be a very naive question, but is there any way DOT can reach out to Google Maps and Apple Maps and say, hey, route this somewhere else so these people don't come down through here? Is that possible?
So it is, with limited success, as I understand it. And so I don't know if there's an independence issue there, but I know that we've worked this issue in several other places.
Who remembers when Mid-Bay Bridge opened that bypass road out there at White Point Road? There was a sign that they had posted, the DOT had posted, and it read, quote, "Your GPS is wrong." And when that process occurred, there was, I'm kidding you, no less than a 12-month conversation where they kept trying to say, quit sending people down this road that is closed. And it is, I don't want to say impossible, but damn near impossible to get them to change that program. And the other part of it is these apps are learning apps. So Waze, as an example, what it picks up on is it picks up on travel time for people that are in it. And it realizes, hey, wait a minute, if I can divert it, I'll go around, regardless of what we say. That's why you have Mercedes-Benz on dirt roads. It doesn't make any sense to you and me because we know those roads. But if you're none the wiser and you say, I want to go from point A to point B, we blindly follow that wonderful piece of equipment. And it's very difficult to get through to them.
And we've had
And
semis
I
and
think they're
people's
gonna
front
have a
yards from that.
justification, and honestly, I don't know that maybe we just want the traffic in somebody else's community.
They plan, hey, let's put a store, something based on traffic.
It's usually, that's the due diligence that an owner does. Where do I think I'll make money? And so, yeah, they look at where's population growing.
I have
Sure.
some properties on 189, and so that was my concern is you're taking up my pastures to put a 4-lane in, which I don't want to lose. And then when the gentleman talked about the Google, years ago when I moved down here, 30 plus years ago, it took us, we didn't have Google, but the map took us 85, which now if we, this is just my womanly mind, I'll just put it out there. If we put in more traffic lights and slow down, would that not, because Google also goes off of how fast.
It will have an
So-
impact. It will have an impact.
It might automatically
So,
It might do it without us telling them to. It might do that. Yeah.
correct, because when they hit, coming from the north, and they hit where the water tower is, you can hear them. And it's 75, 80 miles an hour, and they are flying. I mean, 2 years ago, we had a lady fly out of a car right next door to us because they are flying down there. Yeah, then start slowing down.
I understand. So DOT won't use, so first I have to say, I think every man in the audience just got a bit of a window into, I know I didn't know my wife's way of thinking. I'm understanding better now those stoplights that get put up for me from time to time. There's a grand plan. She's trying to slow me down.
So I'm just trying to think if we, because it is dangerous through there. I mean, they fly through there. And as a person with a long horse trailer, to pull into I am scared to death that I am going to get hit, especially at night. It gets worse and worse.
So what DOT's not going to do is they would, just like with the stoplight, if you read the green book, the engineer's Bible, they're not going to use those types of traffic control devices to effectively slow traffic. That's just not one of the things that they'll do. And so Vincent raised a great example. I fully concur. It is a dangerous intersection. You've got that.
Yes.
You've got a hill and a curve, and so you have sight distance issues, and yet that's not what will control a light coming in. What will control the light coming in is going to be traffic. Yes, but it's going to be a traffic count issue that's going to primarily drive the decision. And I'm not defending the way they do it. I'm just telling you, my gut says that one's not one that will even come close for a very, very long period of time. Let me get this lady one with you.
How many accidents at an intersection does it take before they're like, oh, maybe we do need a light here? Because Hester Church, I think last weekend had 2 or 3 right there at 189.
So that's what this whole process is going to be about now. So they've got that crash data, they've identified issues on the corridor, and they're going to be looking at it, across the spectrum.
But is that even on the radar? Because I'm not really hearing you guys talk about further north.
I'm just telling you, Jason, feel free to disagree.
I would venture to guess it won't hit. The answer is it depends. So the traffic is a very difficult thing to quantify.
He's frustratingly engineered.
Yeah. So when you have, and the way that you look at intersections is you look at the approach directions. So most of the traffic that goes along the intersection of Vincent Ray and 189 is along 189. As a percentage, the side traffic is very low because most cars go past it. So what you don't do is you don't break that for that side traffic because it's just not enough of a percentage to make it worth it. Then your next question was, how many accidents does it take? Well, it depends. The type of accident, I'm going to say the quality or the depth of the accident, those things factor into that decision. So having it where somebody pulls out in front of somebody, that they're going to put that on driver error. But if it's a visibility issue or it's a common turning movement issue, then you get into those factors where it can cause it to trigger into. It didn't come close to looking at a detailed analysis from their feasibility standpoint. That said, we can always ask them to look at it again.
But it's all going to note here, and if you said this and I missed it, I apologize. Take Vincent Ray as a great example. So we talked about, the light surprising folks at Highway 90, even though if they looked at their directions before they got on the road, they would know that that road comes to a literal end, and they should be preparing to slow down because they have to make a turn. Stick a light on Vincent Ray where you have sight distance issues, that people aren't expecting to have to stop, and then try to stop that traffic and see it. So it's not always about, you may make you may resolve one issue, and Hester Church will be the same potential issue, and by doing so, you may create a whole different type of issue that could ultimately, create as many or more crashes or more dangerous crashes at the end of the day. So it's just not, we all want to protect our turning movement, but we have to keep in mind there's always going to be a collateral impact, and that light, if you stop that traffic abruptly, it's going to create a different type of danger.
To the commissioner's point, the most common reason people want an intersection is to allow for a left turn movement to prevent the left conflict with the guy that runs through. When those get put in, there is almost always a switch where you reduce that impact, in other words, a left conflict, with a rear end collision. And the rear end collision count is higher than what you had on the left turn collision. It's an odd phenomenon, which is why they're very cautious when they put signals out.
But the rear ends are usually more survivable.
Not necessarily, because the rate of speed is usually substantially higher.
Somehow we gotta slow them down. It's bad.
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's drivers. And if it's an enforcement issue, Nathan, that's something else we can do.
Because if it's an enforcement issue,
Then we could certainly talk with the sheriff's office. Yeah.
people slow down.
When you see blue lights.
They see blue lights.
Yeah.
They don't slow down if they don't see the blue lights.
Yeah, and that's a fair point.
It's not much of a deterrent these days, honestly, because as soon as it's gone, then we're all back to our same bad habits. Yes, sir.
Talking about speed bumps, traffic lights, flashing lights, whatever, what could be done at Blackman and Baylor fire departments to alert people as they come down and they're approaching the fire department, could be subject to emergency vehicles sitting in the highway?
So we have some recent experience with these types of signals. I will tell you, I'm not an expert. Jason may have more information than I do. I will tell you, DOT typically does not look to their money for those expenditures. They typically look to the local jurisdiction, which they view as an independent taxing authority, and they say that the independent taxing authority will take a look at it, and if we don't see the volume needed to warrant a signal, then they say, if you want an emergency signal, you can pay for it, and then we'll design it and make sure that it meets our criteria for design. They typically simply put the cost back on the local jurisdiction. So at the end of the day, the answer to your question is probably that either one of those departments, and I think they both, could warrant, either one of those departments will be looking at having to figure out how to pay for it. Is that fair, Jason?
Yeah, they could certainly apply for it, but I think you're right. DOT would say you're a private entity, so to speak, that you are welcome to ask for a permit. That's probably how they phrase it.
So the fire district would have to pay for it?
Correct.
Let me get this in one, and I'll come to you.
Well, to piggyback on what this lady over here was saying, it seems to me locally, we could get higher patrols, traffic patrol from the sheriff's department or highway patrol even at those peak hours. We kind of already identified when those peak hours occur. We could have more patrols up here to help slow people down, because you're right, they see the blue lights are going to slow down. And as soon as they start to speed up, they should see another set. But you can do that coming into Baker from the north, okay? In the same way as you start to go down, whenever somebody's sitting there at the fire station, there's a patrol sitting there, they always slow down as they're going down behind you.
I don't disagree with the underlying fundamentals.
But that would, you would have to coordinate that with the local sheriff's department.
We've got a great sheriff's department, and they are, they're our friends, and they'll work with us. I don't control them; they're independent, constitutional officer, but they've always been good. But I suspect what Larry Ward, Sheriff Hayden would tell us, just like Jason would tell me when I'm asking him about fixing another road this week, is that look, I got so many people and I got so many pieces of equipment, and I can put them everywhere you want, but I can't put them in all those places at one time. And so it just comes down to that. It's that finite resource allocation issue. And so there's lots of other places where everybody wants one sitting there all the time. So what inevitably happens, we can make a call, and for a couple of weeks they'll get a deputy up there, you get a little bit of an extra presence, and then it'll wane over time.
Peak time, we know when people are leaving, coming and going for the weekends, for the condos, and the beach traffic this summer.
I hear what you're saying.
How feasible would it be to get little speed bumps or speed tablets put on the road
I'm using myself as an example here. When I go on vacation, I will be the first to admit that I am not always in the moment aware of the fact that I'm driving through somebody else's front yard or their neighborhood, or I'm going where I'm going and I'm on an adventure, and it's not always first of mind for me to stop and slow down and think about the communities that I'm passing through. I wish it was. I wish I was a better person. But my gut says that many of us probably have had those moments as well, where when we're out and we're beyond our community, our perspective shifts a little bit. And yet, I don't anticipate seeing speed tables on a major state highway in any other community that I go through, though I expect they suffer some of the same issues that we suffer. So DOT's not going to do it. It is a major, it's considered obviously a very important highway for getting people in and out and moving goods, and you're not going to see them, I think, create those type of impediments. And I don't think the engineering standards would support it. There's somebody that was killed by doing 60 and launching into the air off the speed table. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
If not a speed table, then why don't we put in something that, say, radar? They have the radar, yes, that are actual signs. And to remind everybody, you put the actual, how fast you're going, and something that flashes red or something that indicates, hey, you're speeding. Get it together.
No, and I think that's something sure we can ask you about. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't know. My gut says that over time the value diminishes as people adjust to that. It's like they adjust it. It's like the empty cop car, right? They'll set some jurisdictions do that, and like the fourth time you come through there, you're just like, there's nobody in the car. I just know there's nobody. I inherently know there's no one in that car because that's where Walton County always puts that car when they want me to think I need to slow down. And so I fear you'd have some of that. So I just don't want it. Certainly we'll have them take a look, but I don't want you to think that may solve our problems out. I don't think it would. 189, Highway 4, yes sir.
About two and a half years ago, we contacted the state department of road department. They did a feasibility for the development. There was only 69 cars that time per hour going on. They said it was not justified deadline.
Okay.
We don't have to do the same problem.
No. They've already said that it meets it. This study said it meets the warrants, need to do the analysis on the fix. Okay. So that is a great example of what has evolved in the past 2.5 years. Fantastic.
What is the traffic count?
Oh, I don't know about that.
The DOT's got a study. I certainly can give you a copy of it. And I don't recall any of the numbers. I will tell you, I was surprised
on average
that they were not as my comparison to Antioch, PJ Adams, my recollection is you'd be surprised there are more cars going up and down that road than there are going down this highway. That was my recollection from taking a look at some of the study. And so there are, is this road, is it important? Yes, but if we look at it objectively compared to some of these others, the traffic count's not as high as you think that it is. It is for those peak periods at those peak times. And then once you balance that out with everything else, it just doesn't have to count.
You know, one simple thing we could do with Dominican down there, look where the yield sign is at. When you come off of 90, it's across the ditch over there on the south side.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I've seen it. They're not looking over this way. They're looking, just keep going.
If I'm making a left off of 90 to go north, I just yield. Because I know those folks that are coming, that are making that right swing, they're not I ain't riding them to yield from. That's a good one. We'll take a left.
So you're saying eastbound left yield?
The yield sign.
I mean, if you're westbound, you turn
30 feet from the road.
Yes. Yeah. When you make if you're at the light headed eastbound and you want to make a left.
Yeah. You're saying that right turn, they just kind of go on.
You've got a small little spot. I just
this way.
I just sit
and you start moving into the highway forward. The yield sign is way off.
Yeah.
That is true.
All right, Highway 489. Going once, going twice. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'll just throw in some observations. We got most of the traffic counts come from upstream. And Alabama, 4-lane Highway 55 into Georgia, from Georgiana on into Andalusia.
built to tow.
And then they put a sign up at the intersection that says, this way to Destin Beaches.
Right.
And I'm surprised everybody followed that as the new shortcut instead of coming down from Montgomery and 4 hours. So it's happening upstream, and the Chamber of Commerce in Alabama appreciates their business, but they're in a hurry to get down to the beaches after they do a pit stop and move. So that's the way it is. I live out here and I work out here in the county, and I call that Highway 65 the speed limit's 189. And I do my part when I'm out there visiting the homes and the parcels out there. I park my county vehicle so it looks like I'm a cop on the side. They don't know what that means. And it stuns them for a little bit, but after they get past me, you can hear them hit the pedal again. Sure, I don't have any red lights or blue lights on it, so, but I do my part to make them safe to slow down. And Vince is great, scares the bejesus out of me when I'm up here with blind yellow, blind yellow on the approach. Leave some type of signage that says dangerous intersection ahead. Something out there gets their attention. Yeah.
Well, the sign's so good, you hardly see it. When you're going 80 miles an hour.
Oh, yeah, you can't see it. It's all the blur. I agree with that.
Yeah. Been out there, I had to drive rubber car.
Yes, ma'am.
So bottom line is, what can we do as citizens? I mean, my overall, I love the north. I have a two-way street here. I love the north traffic coming down because it pays for what I own. However, the speed limit we need to fix. How can we, I don't care if they park alongside the road at my house. That doesn't bother me. I love when I see the sheriff parked at the old Mickey's. That's a perfect spot. Because when they're coming south, they, like I said, they hit that hill and they floor it. So as a citizen, what can I do?
So, I'd like to say I have like a fabulous prepared answer for that, and I don't.
Okay.
What I would say, one, I'll reach out to the sheriff's office personally, and I'm going to ask them to, put a little bit more resource on it. I don't think that's our solution at the end of the day. Ultimately, what y'all will be able to do will be able to stay on top of this issue, make sure that whoever's in my seat in 3.5 years knows that it continues to be a priority, continue to just pay enough attention to make sure that as traffic counts increase, that we are going back to DOT. There is I'll say there's a squeaky wheel kind of aspect to this thing, and it doesn't hurt to keep up the pressure and keep asking. And so every 3 years, we need to be back at DOT going, hey, we're serious now. We told you it was bad before. We're telling you now it's so horrible. Like, come check it again. The other thing, and this one is a double-edged sword, but it's something I'm working on. We can petition the governor to expand the TPO boundaries. So I was talking about that organization that has the ability to help direct DOT's expenditure of dollars. Those are 10 to 20 year efforts typically, and I'll use the bypass as a great example where the TPO, we got engaged, we've been pushing, and we've got some of those dollars along with a bunch of other stuff that was going on. I've chaired that organization for the last 3 years now. When I got elected as a commissioner, Okalosa County was largely not highly participatory. It wasn't staff's fault. It was relying on your elected county commissioners going to another meeting every month, as if we don't have enough meetings to go to. And so you would go to these meetings and they would be talking about, the 5-year plan and the TIP and this plan and that plan and the long range plan and you would just, your eyes would glass over and everybody would just, vote the staff recommendation out of the TPO and then leave. Honestly, we didn't even show up. Like, I started going to the meetings, we had 4 seats on the TPO, and I would be the only commissioner there. But I understood why, because it was agonizing. It was so dense to even understand what was happening. It was just easier just to show up and everybody went the same way and we all left. I eventually kind of cracked the code and figured out, oh wait, they're actually doing important crap here. And we need to figure out, like, if we will, like, start to understand the process and figure out how to, like, move the process, and I won't get too far into the weeds how once or twice we basically hijacked the process to make it work the way we thought it should. But so the TPO can be expanded. If we were to expand it, then this area would be within the TPO, and the TPO then, if you've got engaged members, could start to push those projects, and you can't entirely override DOT. At the end of the day, they're the ones that have to build it or not build it, but you can guide them, and you can make the process ultimately do things that it might have otherwise not done. But the downside is it doesn't come with additional money. So the dollars that are allocated to the TPO out of the federal gas taxes and the state gas taxes, it's the same amount of money. So if we make it, so the DOT has a separate little pot of money for this rural stuff. And if we then say, well, we want to be in the TPO so we can try and get control, they'll go, sure, have at it. You don't get any more money. And so we then have to, we lose access to one pot of money. We have to figure out how to try and prioritize this project within a much larger two-county TPO with lots of other priorities. And so that was a very long answer to your question. At the end of the day, it's stay engaged, stay on top of representing the seat, and make sure that we are not just ignoring it or just sitting around and complaining about it. If we don't keep it top of mind with DOT and pay attention to where it is in the process and where money may become available, then what'll happen, it'll be like the 85 problem where, everyone will just kind of keep throwing up their hands, and then one day we're going to be like, why didn't they pave this thing 20 years ago, kind of thing. And so that's really what you'll be able to do, is just not let it kind of die as a priority. All right, that's a good pivot point. It's hot and humid out here. I don't want to keep anybody any longer than you want to be here, so feel free to get up and walk away when you've had your fill. It will not offend me, I promise. As I said, I'm not running for re-election, so it's totally okay. But we will pivot. We'll talk about anything else that y'all want to talk about. I'll mention just a couple of things real quick, but then we're just going to throw the floor open. It doesn't have to be transportation. We'll talk about whatever the heck y'all want to talk about. We have mentioned the PJ Adams. We mentioned the bypass project. That is, I know it's this big thing, hard to kind of figure out how it's relevant. But it is going to improve traffic flow, depending on if you do have an interest in ever going anywhere other than here. And I know some of us don't, we're perfectly happy to stay right here. But occasionally, if you need to go elsewhere, if you'd like to go elsewhere, you're going to have, once all of those connections and pieces are in place, you're going to have some better options. For example, you'll be able to go, if you want to go eastbound, you're trying to get to the interstate, you can do that without either backtracking the whole or having to get on 85. That's going to be a huge advantage. When there is a cross-town connector, east-west connector within that project, which is a nice little $7 million add-on. We were able to work with the city and get $14 million add-on. Whatever. The price keeps going up. It was 7 when we started.
That's what the city gave us, was $8 million.
Okay, there, whatever, numbers. Anyways, it's funded and it's in there, and so if you want to go to Publix or the hospital annex building thingy, you're going to have the ability to potentially go there without ever touching 85, and you'll be able to turn around and go home again. And so there are going to be some improvements that y'all will see just as locals living here. Yes, sir.
I don't want to throw a wet blanket on it, but it seems to me that that's more likely to increase the traffic on 4 and 189 than anything else.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to say nah, but I mean, yeah.
So I mean, it needs to be considered ahead of time.
If you see
that, as soon as that's done,
it'll be growth. What you're talking about is growth, and I would safely say to you that the traffic on this road or any other road for that matter is going to do one of two things: it's either going to grow or it's going to recede, because either things are growing or things are dying, and we are in a growth community. So I absolutely can't argue with you. If you give a little bit better flow and you make Crestview that much more attractive from a retail standpoint, I don't want to live in the city of Crestview, but you know what? I'd like to live to where I can get to those services within 15, 20 minutes. I wouldn't argue to see growth out this way as you would up towards Lower Hill or out towards East 90. So those are all kind of things that factor into it. That is growth.
So I get it, and it's completely fair. I don't want to get off into the growth management stuff. There's some really interesting things there I'd love to talk about. I've not really ever been able to get momentum amongst my fellow commissioners. This is kind of, it gets complicated really fast, and it risks upsetting people, and so we tend to, government and politicians in particular tend to avoid anything that may be controversial. But let's talk about that, right? All right, so we have lots of farmland. Well, farmland doesn't generate a lot of traffic, and it's important, and it feeds us, and it does all of this sort of stuff, and we want to protect it in theory. That sounds great. We all agree on that. And we may even agree that, hey, we don't want a bunch of subdivisions, right? So maybe we're thinking we just would like to kind of leave it the way it is. Well, let's restrict all of those properties and say you can't build houses on it. Well, that's good until you own one of those properties. And you go, hey, wait a minute. I don't want you telling me what I can or can't do with my property. I bought it. I paid for it. I'm an American. It belongs to me. If I decide I want to, grow houses one day instead of, growing cotton, then I should have the right to do that because it's mine and I paid for it. And so there's that. So we've not been able to really get into that. I personally think there are some things we can do as a county with the growth management code that was a little bit more progressive, that said maybe, look, we're not going to tell you you can't, build houses on that. But here's what we will do. We'll agree that we're going to create a little increment on our taxes, and we're all going to pay some money into that. And then we're going to have a pot of money where we'll buy a conservation easement across that property, where you'll agree as the owner that financially in your interest to agree to never build houses. And so there are some really cool things if we would come together and be willing to get past the initial wailing and gnashing of teeth, and and ultimately kind of get to general agreement without having to worry about getting everybody exactly 100% on board, where we probably actually could maybe actually have some control over this place and what we think it should look like in 20 or 30, 40, 50 years without stifling growth, but just simply guiding it or managing it in a better way than we do currently. And I'm just going to tell you, we do a crappy job currently. And we're no different than basically any other county in the state of Florida that I know. It's the way, it's that there's this inherent tension. And what it really requires is folks willing to roll up their sleeves and have those very difficult conversations and probably talk about things like, hey, I may need an extra middle on your property taxes if you want me to have the money to go preserve this property so that we can keep this the way we want to keep it without actually doing what we consider non-Republican or non-conservative and just mandating. But those are really hard conversations because it creates two tensions, right? It's either I got to tax you or I got to regulate you. You don't want me to do either one of those, and I don't even want to talk about doing either one of those because somebody's going to put it on glossy the next time I run for office, and then I won't get reelected, and then my kids won't eat, and it's a downward spiral. And so what you're going to have to do is, if you really, there's your solution. If you really want to have a meaningful impact, you're going to get somebody like me who's not running for reelection at this point, is okay with folks who want to put things on lawsuits about them, to try and beat on the others enough to say, let's actually have this reasonable but difficult adult conversation. That was long. I did long answers. I apologize. All right, so we were talking about the bypass project. I also wanted to mention our dirt to pave because I think it's important. I think it's making a difference. It's slow and it's painful to get us to where we need to be with it. It's not perfect. I don't know if any of you live on those roads or driven on any of those roads. What we're doing, a lot of these are prescriptive use and maintenance, meaning the county only owns to the edge of maintenance, which depending upon who you ask what the definition of that is, can be very restrictive. When you're the adjacent property owner, you tend to think it should be inside the rollback. When you're me thinking, I gotta have somewhere for 2 cars to pass and just a little bit of stormwater, then it should be a little bit wider than that. We're trying to work on those roads without spending $1 million or $1.5 million a mile and still be able to get a better road than what we have currently. And so you're seeing a lot of lime rock go down right now. I got you, man. You're seeing a lot of lime rock go down. We're letting that sit for about 6 months-ish, and then we're trying to come back on top of that with something called chip seal. Chip seal. I always screw that up. And it looks really cool when you put it down. It looks like a new paved road. It's like, yeah, I got a new asphalt road. But then if you get out and take your pocket knife and you chip up a little piece, it's like 1/4 inch thick. But it's a heck of a lot better than a clay road or a sand road. And the idea is we put that down within the next, hopefully 3 to 5 years, we'll either come back over and put a second chip seal on top, or maybe, good Lord willing, we'll put a little bit of asphalt, put an inch of asphalt on top of that. And when we have like perfect, beautiful roads that, you see in some brand new subdivision when the developers have to build them, no. But will they be cost per mile something we can actually afford and we're getting some good utility out of those surtax dollars? I think the answer is yes. And so I want y'all to know that's out there. We're working it. Staff's been doing good. We've been shooting down on that mileage pretty quickly. We just, I think you said on the agenda this week, what's today, Monday, tomorrow, we're moving forward with being able to actually put some of that money into the private sector, let some of the road contractors out there come in and actually get some of that material down, because we're in a weird spot where we've actually got money for the material and don't have enough trucks and people to actually get it put down. They've actually been doing it in overtime to try and make some progress on those roads. What it will mean long term is that a dirt road costs, I can't remember the numbers now, but substantially more annually to maintain than a paved road does. No doubt, right? You got a person driving up and down in theory twice a week. I know some of you will not agree with that, but in theory twice a week. The graders running up and down those roads. And so actually these roads pay for themselves. Like not having to run that grader constantly. Literally the road will pay the county, pay the taxpayer back for the money that we're investing in it. We need to keep pushing on my fellow commissioners to allocate enough of that money so that we can go from what used to be 200, we're down to 180.
Yeah, we're down about 175.
175, let's see if we
Getting
keep
better.
dropping. And try and get that down, I don't know if we won't get under 100 before I'm out of here, but we'll be heading in that direction if I got anything to say about it. So, yes sir, let's go from there wherever y'all want to go.
Bingo, you hit my comments.
All right.
I'm Martin because I live in East myself, so like I said, I live in the corner of Jacksonville since before I ate it. Like I said, I was astonished by the beach traffic coming down, and I anticipate that's going to be the case this summer because of the light. So the topic of the chip seal, I know last year you had a schedule or you had a plan that was laid out, printed in the newspaper. Is there going to be something that you look at to see where jack scopes at half a mile, racks and stacks? I know it's not to be, any time is competing with other roads, but what's coming down the road this year? Okay.
So, excellent question. Yes, we still have the matrix, as we call it. We're still using that to rack and stack roads. We've made some adjustments as we go. That was originally designed with the idea of going from a dirt road to a full paved road. We adjusted some of the metrics in order to make that, to be able to rack and stack roads based upon the application of this more, I guess we call specialized technique. Because some of the criteria, what makes an ideal candidate for one versus the other are a little bit different. And so there have been some adjustments over time as we go. Stick around, make sure we've got contact information, and I will make sure to make a note to get staff to send you an updated version of the matrix and let you know where Jack Service is sitting currently in that matrix. I honestly don't know offhand where it's at, but I haven't honestly been through there in a while, but my recollections is a pretty heavily traveled little cut through, and so it should, well yeah, apparently, it should be ranking pretty high. And it's one of those, if we take a look at it, I've had this on another one, if we take a look at it and something doesn't seem right, like it's not falling out where it should, we can do an updated traffic count and see if there's been an issue.
That was my second question. Can you put a traffic count there just to see what you get on a weekly hit?
Yes, the answer is yes. If we took a look at that data and you're going, man, there's no way, we can run an updated traffic count.
I've already made my adjustment.
That's right. If you ask what citizens can do, I started to tell you next time they put the little screws out, just go back and forth, back and forth.
Don't do that.
Yes.
Corrupt old man, I love it.
Like I said, I'm not running again.
I love it.
All right, what else? Yes, sir. That's right. I forgot.
I live on Steel Road, and I know that a lot of improvements have been made to the north-south portion of Steel Road. It used to be a chip seal, coal mix type road, and they put the hot mix asphalt on top of it, which is great. And they got some funding to replace the concrete bridge at the southeast section of it, which is great. One approach hill is paved, has been for a pretty good while, but the eastern hill is still clay, and any repairs that are made to that road, they all end up washing down the Penny Creek every time there's a storm event. And there's a great bridge down there, and the bridge is covered over with clay now because it wasn't, maybe lost funding, local funding. It wasn't paved from Griffith Mill all the way down to Penny Creek.
It will be.
Okay, because I know there were some right-of-way issues maybe,
Yes.
but we do really want that fixed, not for a traffic quality standpoint, but, you know, we don't, it's disturbing to see the sediment wash down to the creek from the repairs of the ruts and stuff like that.
Completely agree. And it's egregious. I mean, if you look at the bank height, it's egregious. And it's sad to think about that much sediment went into that water body. It is that one. I don't know exact time schedule.
That one was the one where the state paid for an off-system bridge, and part of that was an agreement where we had to get right-of-way and the county has to pay road. I don't know the timing on that, but I'm getting a note down to figure that out.
You got my commitment. That one's going to get done because it bugs me so much, that level of sediment. And the folks on that course, they've not been difficult. It's just it's a process.
When they finished the bridge, they put like this nice little hump in there so that it would hopefully help to divert some of the water going down into Fish Creek, and now it's completely gone.
Okay.
And the bridge has been out for a year now, and what they tried to do is completely gone.
Okay.
And they're now grading in the concrete scallops. They're actually grading and they're pulling the dirt back out.
Yeah. No, that one's got to be. It's got to be fixed. I completely agree. Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to, this is that road condition, are you able to clarify any of the things we have for two subdivisions, a SEPCO, a truck stop, you know, are you able to clarify anything that is coming or already permitted to be built out here?
So interestingly, usually as a county commissioner, we're one of the last to know. They like to keep their, everybody likes to keep their thing they're doing close to their chest, and so a lot of times they don't come out and tell us until they're darn close to their process. And so I've not heard about the neighborhoods. I'm not doubting that they're working their way through the process, and they may well be. I don't know offhand. I have seen a plan for development of the area adjacent to the church at 4 and 90. And it is a proposal for a gas station and for some commercial space at that site, which is zoned mixed use. John, is this one, where is this one at?
They're looking for a change of zoning to C3.
That's right, okay. Is it going from mixed use to
Yes.
Okay, that one is coming forward for the rezone request. Has that gone in front of planning commission?
Goes in front of you tomorrow.
Okay, has it gone to planning? So
It's gone through the planning commission and unanimously approved.
Okay.
But it's a convenience store is what it's listed as.
But
So
the
whether
plan-
that's a SEPCO or a Tom Thumb, it's a convenience store, and then there's like two little small strip malls on the north end of the property.
But currently it's just coming for a rezone.
Yes.
Yeah. So this gets into that a rezoning is we can ask and they can't tell us, but we can't make a decision for a rezone based upon what they're going to put in. So in other words, if we say, well, we'll zone it to commercial, but you can't do, a car lot, you can only do a gas station or vice versa. That we don't get to get into. We either have to determine that the zoning categorization that they're requesting is appropriate or it's not appropriate. I'll just tell you, my expectation is that will get approved. The zoning request will get approved. It's at the corner of two highways. It is the type of location where you would typically want to see commercial going, as opposed to some alternatives that may be less palatable to commercial. They're going to, assuming they get their rezoning, then they're going to have to come back through the process, go through the development process, and that's where we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual layout of their site and any buffering that they require for the adjacent uses, whether it's houses that are on the north, or whether it's the churches to the south, and what they'll actually have to do to kind of screen and buffer and make their actual proposal fit on that property.
Is there a way to find out who bought that or who's coming in there? I'm not talking about I'm not
Yeah.
who owns that SEPCO?
Who owns that piece of property? Yeah, I presume at this point that's probably public record as far as the property appraiser's website goes. Certainly within the county's agenda item. It's available online.
The trick you got to run to is it's usually not obvious.
Right.
They'll put it in an LLC and it doesn't say, hey, I'm going to build a gas station here, LLC. It's just, they put these company names in there, so you kind of have to.
But there are documents in our, if you go
keep looking. And you can go to Sunbiz and find out how it's registered, but usually they're just an attorney in Pensacola or something like that.
And those documents are in our county agenda for tomorrow.
That's right.
So there is you can get access to a bunch of stuff just by going on our county website. and then downloading the agenda for tomorrow.
Where's that meeting?
Here, press yours.
What next? Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we're talking about infrastructure for the things that are coming for the new subdivisions and whatnot. I currently live in Mossio, who apparently had no forethought or foresight, because clearly we need a left turn lane going south on the board. I know that because there's been wrecks right there, because people whip around you on the right when you're trying to make the left, picking up your kids from school. So the question would be, I mean, number one, I would love if I could get a turn on there. That's very personal to me. But for the other subdivisions that are being put in, are they going to require like the builders or somebody to at least help fund for left-hand turns or whatever, prevent, possible, because let's be honest, it's increasing.
Yes, agreed. No, I understand the question, completely agree. I can't take ownership for, I don't think any of those. I think all of those subdivisions that have been built were either, if not constructed, permitted, it's been a lot. I think those were all pre-recessions, at least going through the planning process. So the short answer is yes, there is a process that's in place where the developer actually has to fund a traffic study that has to be done. And there are, through that study, identified improvements that are required in order for them not to impede upon levels of service. I can tell you, at least for the next 3.5 years as I'm in this seat, if we have any of those come that are on a highway, I will be very mindful of at least using whatever leverage I have to try and push those issues if they're not already evident through the process, the traffic study process, because of exactly that. Because you're not the first. I think 3 subdivisions heading out of here where folks are going, why don't we have a turn lane? And the answer is, honestly, I don't know. Seems to me if you were building something of that scope, it probably should require one. But it probably goes back to traffic count. At the time, the traffic count probably didn't warranted. And it's hindsight now. I'm not blaming anybody. I was going to remember, but traffic took a nosedive in the recession. I mean, you saw substantial reductions in traffic counts everywhere. And honestly, as we were, not just we, everywhere, we were trying to figure out how to get people employed and get out of recession and jobs. The last thing we were thinking about was putting extra cost on anybody who wanted to actually build anything. And in hindsight, probably should have. But certainly I can tell you from where we're sitting right now, an issue that I think we will be keyed in on. Okay. Anybody else? It's getting hot and lucky, tired and hungry.
Supper sounding good.
Do you know what's going in the medical facility up the road?
Say it again.
Do you know what's going in the medical facility?
I do not. They don't have to answer that. Internet. All right. Who's serious about internet?
Oh Lord, help us. Help us, Lord.
So the good news is, out of the pandemic, such as there is good news, there is a ton of money being minted in some secret location by the federal government, and they're delivering it here in armored trucks or something. And so the county is getting what is, I think, by most reasonable standards, an excessive amount of money, frankly, for what we probably actually need, especially considering that even myself, my kids, these young ladies will all be paying back for the next 50 years. Nevertheless, it's here. We're going to try and figure out how to make good use of it. One of the things that is allowable, certainly within this next round of funding that's coming, is it's got a lot of more opportunities for infrastructure. As I understand it, some of the specifically identified things are internet accessibility in rural areas, etc. Now, having a few $1 million to spend is certainly that's step one. That's great. Actually implementing that and then figuring out how to translate that into robust internet accessibility is actually a little bit more of a challenging thing. Understanding that the county is not in the internet business as far as piping it into your house. Typically, there's around here not much, but typically there is somebody who wants to make money off of selling you internet accessibility. And so For them, right, it's business, I get it. Like they need, if they're gonna get $100 a month from you, but it's gonna cost them, $100,000 to get internet to your road, and you've only got 6 customers, they're gonna go find a place that's a little bit more dense to provide their internet. The good news is technology is evolving, and we've got a little bit of money, and so we have never, I think I can say this, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the county traditionally, anyone with like internet, they're like, yeah, not a problem, we don't do that. We did do internet for ourselves, so for our county infrastructure, for all of our county buildings, we actually have a really robust fiber system that's out there. And that's actually a good thing, is the taxpayer saves you a bunch of money, because we typically got pulled around by the nose by the internet companies and by the phone companies and paid and absorbed them out. So that system has paid for itself. We've added the military to it through the years. We've added some of the schools to it, or we plan to add more of the schools to it. And so we're now engaged actively in, is there a way to use our existing ring system, our existing county fiber, add to it additional segments of fiber. So, and we tend to like to make it in a ring. So think about, for example, you've got redundancy that goes all around the south end, comes all the way up to Crestview, goes through Crestview, and then actually goes back down to the south end again in separate conduits. So if you get a cut on any one point in that ring, and this is like super cool and above my pay grade, but it automatically reroutes traffic. And so you can literally sever the line, and it'll just send the signal the other way. And so you can keep that connectivity. So imagine then taking that and running it, let's say, all the way up 85 Lower Hill, cut across Highway 2, come back down 189, and connect to 90, and so what you have a ring. You have a system where then you could run at least the trunk fiber through some of these communities that are currently being underserved. The question is, how do you get it from that trunk line, which would cost literally millions of dollars just to put that in the ground, then how do I get it into your house? And that's the challenge right now that we're chewing on. I think we've got a good idea on the fiber ring and the money to pay for it, and we're moving forward on that. We're going to add into that these, using some of your surtax dollars, that half-penny sales tax, we're revamping the county's emergency communication system. That is going to mean several additional towers placed across the county. Those will actually have these, what's called backhaul capability, which is above my pay grade, but it basically is like a major internet conduit in the sky where it can shoot like point-to-point microwave. And so you take that, you add into that some actual fiber in the ground, and all of a sudden you may have the infrastructure in place. Then we have to figure out, do we do Wi-Fi? Do we open up, which is one of the early ideas, maybe just to take facilities like this one and put really robust kind of like Wi-Fi networks coming out of these that are open to the public. And so if you have no other choice, rather than having to drive wherever, you might be able to at least come up here and sit at the park bench and give people out their laptop and do their homework or whatever. That would be an early phase, and then potentially figuring out how we would actually interface with those last mile providers, right? The Comcasts or the CenturyLinks or the whoever's, to allow them access to county-owned fiber if they're willing to then kind of put in some of the last mile connectivity. So no answer tomorrow, but closer than we've ever been to kind of figuring out how to get an answer. And for the first time ever, actually having your county government engaged in being a part of that solution, rather than just being like, yeah, not our problem. All right. Shall we end it there on a high note? Something positive?